Hello, this is Kaolin from the Essence of Transformation, and today is Wednesday, September 24th, and I imagine that the show will be on the air on the 26th, most probably. And I hope that all of you are doing well and also coping with many of the changes that usually accompany some degree of transformation. And I'm an astrologer and a psychic medium and an author and a lecturer. And I've been a workshop facilitator, and I'm now designing my own programs. I'm also a member of the National Organization for Women, and I'm very pleased to be a part of that organization, especially in these times when women's rights are being dissolved in so many states. However, the work that I've chosen in this particular podcast has to do with esotericism. It has to do with astrology. It has to do with psychic energy, and it has to do with healing. So, of course, it's also going to have to do with problem areas, conflicting perceptions of reality, an assimilation of one's gifts and how to apply them and use them in constructive manners for themselves, because I do believe that many of my listeners are extremely talented, extremely gifted, and are also something called light beings, so that they have incarnated with the intention of having very positive healing influences on people in their surroundings and beyond. And that doing that is a gift, and that gift tends to accelerate the more one focuses on it and the more one can identify it, because many light workers come into family of origin situations that are extremely challenging and confusing, and that tends to be part of the makeup of a person. But I will actually say a soul, the soul of the person, who chooses to incarnate in a particular period of time, in a particular place, in a particular culture, in order to advance their own development. And in many instances, to improve the conditions of the world that they inhabit. But not everybody does that. Not everybody chooses to, not everybody is destined to, and certainly not everybody does that. Of course, if everybody did that, there'd be no work for light workers to do. We'd all be on vacation. But we're not. So one of the discussions that I wanted to bring to the table here today is there is so much talk about good and bad, evil and enlightened, all these polar opposites. But there's also a real knowledge, and very much an advanced knowledge, of frequencies, vibrational frequencies, energy matches, and everyone is kind of reassessing what kind of role does spirituality play in their life really? How influential should it actually be in their relationships? To what degree do we consider our spirituality to have anything to do with the professions we are in? And these are some of the things that have interested me since the last podcast, as I listen to people discussing these particular kinds of issues. Somebody once asked me, do I believe in evil? And I had to say no, because I believe that what they were talking about, and they explained it more fully, and I still couldn't say evil. It is actually the shadow side of the collective unconscious, to me. That's what that whole area of dissension, hate, criminality, you name it. It actually is a shadow side of the collective unconscious, which influences people in their development, which is one reason why family of origin issues, if somebody is consumed by their own shadow, you will find their abusers. And sadly, children are victimized by abusers, as we see constantly in the news. And they've always been. I like to answer some questions I've received in the last few weeks every time I do a podcast. And one of them was, really, what kind of childhood did I actually have in order to have the perspective that I tend to have on things? And they were surprised to hear that I had had a lot of real difficulties in my childhood, a lot of violence. There was a lot of alcoholism in my family. My father was a bipolar, not schizophrenic, bipolar alcoholic with, and he had psychotic breaks. And my mother was a total advanced alcoholic. And my sister wrote a book about it, which she hasn't needed me to mention the book on the air yet. One day I may, but it was published by Seal Feminist Press, and it discusses my family of origin from her experience within it. So it isn't as if my childhood was so wonderful that I can choose to say there is no evil as far as I'm concerned, but there is the shadow side of the collective unconscious. So I thought I would explain that a little bit. Because if you come into the world and you have a physical body and you have, of course, a brain, and what's going to happen with the shadow side of collective unconscious is sometimes people incarnate without a full sense of the wholeness of their beingness prior to the incarnation. So I don't believe that people come in and go, well, I'm going to have this particular illness. I think some of the illnesses that people come into the world with are a result of other incarnations in which some aspects of that incarnation have stayed with them, remained with them, and has resonated. And then they incarnate and repeat certain patterns until finally there's a lesson regarding that pattern. So you may choose to then change the pattern. And I'm going to keep a very simple analogy. Let's say you're deeply involved in academia, you progress to the extent to which you are satisfied, you become dissatisfied, and you want to become a bird watcher. So you're going to switch from the academic into being a bird watcher. So these transitions in our lives happen a lot. I see people develop and grow according to those kinds of changes. And a lot of what is problematic when you are needing to see a therapist, for example, is that you're having a difficult time transitioning from one state of consciousness to the other, or from one level of acceptance about a serious problem that you're having. And the problem could be within you or without you. It could have to do with someone's treatment of you or of your own treatment of yourself, which needs an evaluation and needs reality checks and needs change. But the most common denominator that I noticed in the last few decades is repeatedly working on something, even though you know you are resistant to change and you really have no intention of changing. In which case, I don't consider certain therapists to actually be therapists, and some of you can be offended by that message, but it's true. That's been my experience with people. But it's more like becoming a parent or becoming a friend. So you become a friend to the person. And even I know therapists, and they don't even have expectations of change or growth. They don't. So it's sort of repeating certain cycles of self-acceptance when in fact the intention people have told me of their seeing a therapist is that they can change. Whether that change involves reviewing one's trauma or getting more involved in the critical analysis of trauma, or simply wanting to grow and kind of reassess who you are, where you are, whether or not you may want to move to another state, whether or not you may want to get divorced, maybe not, you might want to have children or not. So these are other reasons to be seeing somebody and getting some serious attention on what your plans are and what you're thinking you may want, or why you don't want something. And sometimes why you don't want something can be as interesting and important as why you do. But anyway, my answer to evil is that it is the shadow side of the collective unconscious. Another aspect of that is that people have asked me, well, what is light? What is really supernatural light? And they may have had their own experiences with it, even in their photographs. So what is it? What is it really? And of course, I consider it supernatural light, and it's obvious in my photos on my spiritually-speaking.org website and on episode 1 of The Essence of Transformation. I tend to think that the light is from the divine, which would be the source, and that it also includes knowledge, because you'll notice when people refer to being in really bad shape or having been in very bad shape, they will refer to it often as the dark night of the soul. I don't refer to it that way, but others have referred to it a lot that way. So what you're looking for then is what gets you out of that. Well, generally consciousness, becoming conscious, becoming aware. If you have addiction issues, it's becoming sober. But on another level, spiritually speaking, one thing that I'm learning these past 2 years is that people are actually having experiences with portals, with sort of a window in their dreams, or even when they're awake, or a light that actually is symbolic of a portal, and for some people is a portal, in which they pass through that portal, and on the other side is information or visual images of enlightenment or empowerment or peace. So, one other question somebody asked a few weeks ago, it's such a good question, is whether or not I happen to think that people should make decisions based on their heart or their gut. And of course, we can get into the context of what kind of decisions are we talking about. But in general, I'm going to keep it very simple. It's wisest to go with your gut, because the gut is your judgment center. And that's the one that knows what the outcomes are going to be. So if you're hoping to go into a situation and you have a lot of positive feelings about it, or hopes, or dreams, or whatever it is, your gut feeling might be, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe not now. And I'm going to use a sample. Let's say you wanted to go to college, but there's been a lot of crises in the last couple of years in your situation. There has been for many, many people. So maybe they won't. Plus, college doesn't look quite like it did a year or 2 or 3 ago. It doesn't. And so anyway, you're considering going to college, and you go and you think you're going to sign up, and you think you're going to apply for aid and register, but you get to the building and you have this gut feeling like, don't do this. But you keep taking steps forward anyway, because in your heart, emotionally, you're feeling you're really in need. You're in need of an education. You may as well do it now rather than later. Or you're needing the socialization. Or you've had it with your job, if you have a job. And you're kind of occupied with the hopes and dreams of getting your education now. But your gut is stopping you, and your gut is going, not now. I always think it is wisest to wait to follow your gut, because lots of times we have a real serious resistance. And I respect resistance. I just do. I think timing is very important. I had a client who had desperately tried to get into certain colleges that she did not happen to get into, which was surprising given her academic credits and scores and history and all of that. So it was a surprise. And she had been trying to figure it out. And then last year, there were all these changes with immigration and all this trauma that everybody's going through. So many people are experiencing, and we're experiencing anyway as a collective unit. I don't know anybody who's not going through enormous changes right now, not only ideologically or politically, but emotionally and spiritually. But anyway, and then it really turned out that it was best that she not be in school right now, given the situation. It turned out that it was best that she was not. So I think that lots of times the future comes to us in certain ways and informs us and educates us and gives us messages. And I would say that to the one who's thinking of going to school now and getting that gut feeling, don't. Pay attention and don't. Go in 6 months. Go in a year. Because that energy is an energy from the future coming into the present. And then it might take a couple of months to realize, thank heaven I didn't do that, because since I didn't, I was available for this other job that I had already applied for. Or something happened within my family system that I needed to be completely present and available for. So it's good to kind of chill out when you can and pay attention, and that was my answer. Another thing is the hard emotions, they change. They change from day to day for many of us. There's not an indication of being unstable. It's an indication of being very much in the present and being a receiver of what's really going on and what's really not. It also is a sign of discernment, reviewing, evaluating, and that decision-making process. So it doesn't mean you don't pay attention to the heart or care or respect emotion. Respect it. But if your gut is saying, I don't think so, then it's wisest to pay attention to your gut. For a little bit, I wanted to mention sun signs again because, for one thing, they're a lot of fun. So in astrology, let's say I will have some clients and they'll come in and they'll say what sign they are. And then they'll be either happy or unhappy about what sign they are. Like someone will come in and go, I'm a Scorpio and we have really bad reputations, but I'm really a good person. So it's kind of funny that their take on it is to absorb the stereotypical criticisms of a subject that they don't really know very well themselves. However, they do know who they are. So sometimes people will be kind of in defense of their sign. I don't see it that way. I see it as you incarnate into the sun sign that you're destined to be. So actually, it's an enormous accomplishment. If you come in as a Gemini and you have that duality factor, and it can confuse people around you, and you get clearer and clearer about it because you don't want to lose people around you. You don't want to confuse them. So you kind of have to hone in on certain things and be maybe more reliable or consistent and work on those issues while you're also entertaining people, while you're funny, while you're not intimidating to hang out with, because those are some of the very positive aspects of Geminis. They'll talk about anything. They will discuss almost anything with you. So it's important to realize that, well, that's what you're supposed to be. It's not that you're made a mistake or that it's bad or it's wrong. Not at all. And then we have, Aries, which are very domineering people. They're very strong, extremely independent, and they have a very inspired sense of their own identity and also their own worth. And that's extremely, extremely common across the board with Aries, because fundamentally they're really pioneers, and they tend to be almost like, extremely driven, very driven, and pretty self-satisfied. That's pretty much what Aries are like, a lot. So if you get down to really know an Aries very well, you'll find that they are distinctly individual. They are not group dynamic people, although they work very well in groups. But they're absolutely going to be the innovators, be more independent than others might be within the group, see things differently, and express it very, very clearly. Because one thing Aries don't like to do, they're not followers, they're leaders. Then you would have Taurians, and Taurians are they're actually very grounded. They have a profound sense of beauty, and they can see beauty in almost anything. But the real desire of the Taurian is to manifest. They are manifestors. And they are very slow to burn. If you offend a Taurian, they will act like it's okay. It's okay. Then do it again. It's okay. It's okay. Then do it again. And then all of a sudden, boom, boom, you struck a chord. And then they start to come out with their anger about it and the rage. And they'll go, remember on 4 months ago at 4:30 in the afternoon, we were in this particular store and you said that. Then you realize they have the list. Everything is memorized. Taurians don't like to be wrong about anything. It's really hard for them to be wrong about anything. And they often focus on one particular gift of theirs, and then they totally magnify it and perfect it. And it is what they're intended, that's what they're meant to do. It's what they're born to do. So if you are a family member or a friend or a co-worker and you kind of don't like that kind of energy, you might be critical of them, but it is what they're here for. That is what they do. And if you know one very, very well, they can also go into depressions and be very quiet about it, like they don't really like to express or be too transparent. But one of the signs of a Taurian kind of being impacted by some form of depression is if they're withdrawing too much, if they're not participating enough. Because they also can be extremely entertaining, and they like to entertain. So if you find one is kind of shutting down, that's when you might know something's happening, something's happened. And you can ask them, feel free to always ask. When people shut down, it's not a commercial. It's not a way of trying to get attention. It's not. Some people cannot speak up. Some people withdraw. Taurians would tend to withdraw before they're going to speak up. Another thing with Taurians is they want everything to be nice. They do not like conflict. They like everything to be nice. Let's see what else is there. I just spoke about Gemini. So I want to go into Cancer. And Cancer is, let me see. Cancer is very emotional and very intuitive and very psychic. So if you know anybody who's a Cancer, if you are a Cancer, then you were born with a very strong intuition, which it can take time to figure out what does it mean exactly. What is this feeling about? Why, if I walk into a room, do I get this sense and somebody else gets a totally different vibe from the room? Well, some of it is because you're really tuned in. And you may be tuned in to an environment that you don't really like, that you don't really want to be tuned into. And the wisest thing to do then is to leave the environment. It really is, because your intuition is such a part of you that it takes time to figure out what's a good match for that energy. So that's very important, is to keep finding out what works for you. Another thing is the emotions change frequently, like every 24 hours. Emotions for Cancers can change. That's part of the beauty of Cancer, however, is that they experience emotion so deeply that they give it a great deal of credence in much of their decisions. And people who know them come to learn that they may be slow to arrive at a certain decision, and you may not agree with decisions that they are making, but they have their own rhythm regarding that whole process. And emotion has a great deal to do with the outcomes of their decisions. Let me see. I'm going to talk about Sagittarians for a moment. They just sort of came on my mind here. With Sagittarians, they're a fire sign, of course. They're very independent. Most often, their fathers are emotionally absent or physically absent in their upbringing. So he may be physically present, but he could have a particular illness, which makes him somewhat inaccessible. So a Sagittarian will try to find their own way regarding that energy, that kind of energy of parental parenting themselves or parenting others. And they usually are assigned that role in life. It's not a role that they consciously are choosing. Now, especially we're talking about childhood. But it's one that they're kind of assigned in life due to the family circumstance. And they need a great deal of freedom, but generally they're not given that freedom in their upbringings, but they need it. So later on in life, when they hit around 16, 17, 18, they can be incredibly rebellious because, of course, now they're fighting all of the oppression of the control mechanisms of their upbringings. That can have two effects. It can be incredibly freeing and enlightening, depending on what they do with that, or totally destructive. In which case they pay for those decisions for a long time afterwards, and you can't really reconcile that. However, there's another element to Sagittarius that's really important, and that is that they're kind of natural healers. But one of the lessons that they learn in life is they have to keep giving themselves permission to be themselves, because they resist that again and again and again. And it's like, no, be yourself. Be yourself. But don't be so rebellious that you actually hurt yourself. Don't take things out on yourself. But go that extra mile and keep taking those steps toward your own freedom, whatever those steps may need to be. And just do it. And Sagittarians appear to be very independent, but actually they're really not. They're very dependent. But another thing is they have a very active fantasy life. So all you Sagittarians out there listening to me have a very, very active fantasy life. That's a wonderful thing. It's creative. It's a wonderful thing. The point is to satisfy your curiosity and satisfy those fantasies. Why not have a dream that seems almost impossible to have come true? This is what Sagittarians are full of. They're full of that. And they're full of that for other people. So they always encourage other people to do their thing. Now, do your thing. No, that's not ridiculous. No, it's not outlandish. No, it's not impossible. Just do it. Go do it. And in that respect, they always are very welcoming people to others in their lives. We have Scorpio, which is really a power sign, and it's how to use their power or abuse their power, but it's a real power issue. So with power, there's always issues of control or no control, in control or out of control. I think some Scorpios would probably be laughing right now because I'm sure this will resonate. So all of our upbringings influence us and our sun sign. So naturally, this would be somewhat reflective of the way that you were raised and your answer to the way you were raised. You may have had extremely controlling parents for a very good reason. Depends on where you're raised and what you're doing and what they're up to and what the family dynamic is. But they may not. But the bottom line is that you're going to take pieces of that with you. And people who get to know you really well begin to understand that that's the essence, that's the truth of you. And you also need to learn how to use it, without abusing it. Another important sign, all of them are important, is Virgo. And Virgo, we just had a solar eclipse in Virgo the other night. And Virgos are natural cleaner uppers. They like to come in and clean up. Everything needs to be straightened up. They'll come into your life and try to clean up your life while their life is a mess. That's kind of that's the way it goes with Virgos. Their life can be a total mess, but they'll go into your life and go, well, this needs to be changed. You got to do that. Try to do this. Try to do that. It's well-intentioned, but, that's kind of the way that they work. They're also good teachers. They're just naturally good teachers. And they absolutely want things to be in order. They want things to fall into a certain line. They want a step-by-step process that assures progress. That's what they want. So I think that Virgo teachers are incredible because they really are determined to make sure you understand everything you are learning. They don't let things go. And they're also great in certain professions because when they do a job, they're going to do a job. If the job requires completion, no matter how tedious it is, they will do it. And that's kind of the way that they work. The downside of Virgo is they're very self-critical, and they were raised very critically as children, and they internalize those criticisms. So if you, even on a job, if you have to go, well, look, I kind of wanted this done this way, but you did it that way, they can really come to resent any form of criticism because they've already criticized themselves. They already probably spent a good hour or two going, I wonder if I should do it this way or that way. And kind of obsessing about it, then making their decision. So if you walk into the room and you go, well, I think it should be done that way, they'll be very deeply hurt. And that's one other part of Virgo. And it's kind of an embarrassing part of Virgo is that their feelings get hurt so seriously and often, but they don't like to show you. So instead of showing you that they're vulnerable, they'll be super critical of you. So it's always a sign in friendship or other kinds of dynamics that when they start to be critical of you, it means they're very attached and they're trusting you and they're really relying upon you. So I do think this is a comical part of Virgo, which a lot of people don't understand. But after you know any Virgo, brother, sister, parent, anyone, and you think about it, you go, oh, that's so funny. That's really true. This is part of what I love about astrology. I love how much fun it is. I think it's really a lot of fun. So another sign that's important is, of course, Leo. And Leos come into the world with very strict parenting. And they're often very disapproved of, even as children. For example, a mother will say, we're going to cross the street here to the right, and Leo will go to the left. It's just a Leo thing. Leos don't like to follow instructions. They are very rebellious by nature, and they're very known for having a heart of gold, and they do, because they'll do almost anything for you if they trust you and believe you. Then if they don't, it's as if you never knew them before, because that's a side of things that they save for last. They're just wait, yeah, okay, good. And then if you mess with them, it's like, who are you? And that's very Leo. Of course, there's a lot of strength in Leos, which is what people tend to rely upon to come into their lives. So Leos have to be very discerning about what degree of curiosity, admiration, or weakness do Leos want in their circle from people? What degree of it can a Leo tolerate? Because Leos tend to draw people in who need reassurance of their worth. because Leos have already figured that out for themselves. In their family of origin situation or whatever, their young adulthood involved, it meant getting their act together about that and getting their own self-approval down where it's non-negotiable. Now, people are drawn to that as well. They admire that. A lot of people are not that way. They're a little more indecisive, a little bit scared of rejection. Leos could care less. So if you know a Leo, you may be laughing at this as well. If you are a Leo, you totally get what I'm saying. And Leos are here to really follow their ambitions, and they are here to also make dreams come true. They're another fire sign like Sagittarius and Aries. And fire signs have a low tolerance level for not making dreams come true. Fire signs do not believe that you have to accept anything that you don't agree with. And then the brilliance of fire signs is that they'll find their ways to prove it and to do it. They're going to prove it and do it. And it doesn't matter what it takes. And that's what they do. For Aries, it's more, I am who I am. You don't like how I am? Okay, bye-bye. It's okay. But on the other hand, it's like, I am who I am. Yes, I am. And that's non-negotiable. With Sagittarians, it's like, I'm a dreamer. I'm a dreamer. If you like to dream, hang out with me. If you don't like to dream, you probably won't want to hang out with me. That's fine. Because I'm too busy. I'm busy dreaming. So don't interrupt. Just keep going. Because I'm dreaming. The surprising thing with Sagittarians is they make their dreams come true when people least expect it. That's a nice little aspect of the Sagittarian personality. They do. They pull it together. People around them don't know how they did it. How'd they do that? I don't know. And it is magical, and they believe in magic. Leos will just keep doing their thing. That's the kind of fire sign they are. They're like, oh, really? Okay. Back in the jungle. That's okay. I'm happy in the jungle. I'm happiest in the jungle. It's fine. And that has to do with everything. Leos just keep moving it. And that's really the truth of fire sign people. So if you're not a fire sign and that intimidates you or frightens you because you won't have control over them or what they do, then they're not for you. But if you have a fire sign who's working for you in any capacity that you believe in and they believe in, wonderful things should take place as a result of that combination. Another sign that's very important, of course, is Libra, and we just passed. Well, Libra is now. It's in the present. That's right, Libra. Beautiful. Autumn. Wonderful. Tremendous energy. Air sign. Really intelligent. Loves relating. Loves group dynamics and needs them. So it's not even a question of choice. They need group dynamics. They might need solitude in order to process things. However, group dynamics are where it's at for Libra. Another thing with Libras is they're extremely competitive, but they don't really like to show that they are. It's a secret. Shh. But if you ever watch a Libra work or listen to them discuss their work, whether the work is family life, whether it's a job, whether it's academia, there's always a plan. There's always something going on. There's always something slightly better to aspire to. There's always some form of conflict that they came from or just came out of. The whole essence of Libra is to be establishing harmony in places where there may be a lack of harmony. When they're children, their parents do not allow them to be disrespectful. They have to be courteous. They're not allowed to speak angrily, although there's anger in the household. And there's anger in the household that is not being spoken of as if it's anger in the household, but there's anger. So they absorb a lot of anger from 0 to 4 years old, whoever their guardians are. And so naturally, karmically, you could say, that's a loaded word, is the inevitability of them coming into the incarnation and having to understand there's a lot going on beneath what's being said, number one. Number two, people tend to be nice or try to be nice and hide their true feelings, in which case there may be a lack of growth or a lack of happiness or a lack of satisfaction in people around them. And then they're going to try to reconcile that in life. They don't like that. So they tend to work in fields that have to do with communication. They're working in communication because they've already been indoctrinated into this field by their early childhood experience. And they're natural problem solvers. I've never met a Libra who did not have, male or female, doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter anything about a Libra, any Libra. They are determined to see group experience as a positive experience. Many Libras are actually go into the Army or the Navy because they want the group dynamic and they want to work on peace their way. They want to work on communication their way. Many Libras are often having to figure out how to let their intelligence, which plays such a huge role in their life, they have to figure out how can their intelligence be integrated and work for their life experience. How does their intelligence get downloaded and give them the benefit, even the financial benefit, of their work and of their instincts and of their talents? And that takes some time, usually for Libras. Another thing with Libras is their desire for peace seems contrary to the people they draw to them, because most often they draw people to them who are in conflict and who are conflicted, but also conflictual. So there can be a lot of intimidation in group dynamics for Libra, in which somehow or other, how did things suddenly blow up or get cuckoo? And then how do they resolve it? And is it their issue and is it their problem to do that? Libras tend to believe that it is. So in certain professions, it's a good way to exercise and channel that energy and that desire to see things get worked out with a satisfying outcome. Excuse me. What else? I'm thinking of other signs offhand. Okay, we have discussed Scorpio, Leo, Cancer, Virgo, Sagittarius, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and what else? Virgo. Yeah. Sorry, it's taking me a moment. I hadn't really planned to discuss it to this degree. I just want to make sure I don't leave anybody behind here. But one thing that I find really hilarious is when people go, I can't stand this particular sign because of this particular issue. And I just do find it funny, because part of what's really fantastic about astrology for me is is that that's who they are. Astrology really shows you, so does the rising sign, which I won't get into in this show because it would take too long, and your moon sign. But it shows people who you really are. Like, I love meeting people and knowing what sign they are because I think it's fascinating, because I know something about the journey already, and the rest is their interpretation of it and where they're at, which is fascinating to me. Okay, so another sign is Capricorn. And Capricorns are born again into a very strict environment. It's an earth sign. And one of the things with Capricorn that is so important, the gender doesn't matter. It's the same thing for Capricorns, which is patience. They have to have a lot of patience because they come here pretty evolved spiritually with some wisdom, but it's very latent. It gets very, very suppressed because their parents are usually extremely strict, and very critical of men. So in a household, for a Capricorn, male or female, they usually hear a lot of negative talk about men. This doesn't matter whether or not their parents are together, male and female, happy or not. It really doesn't matter. It's just the dynamic that comes in. It is the part of their lesson is to how to reconcile that, how to deal with it themselves, how to get rid of their parents' shadow over those dynamics and bring the light in to their own lives, because they have to go through a cycle of disassociating from and refusing to accept the parents' experience of maleness. And so that's interesting. And that's another interesting aspect of family dynamics in general. But that's what they have to do. And it's part of their spiritual voyage. So a lot of Capricorns don't really develop in terms of a wholeness and a real spiritual contentment about themselves until they're about 30. It usually takes that Saturn return in order for them to let go, because parents of a Capricorn are extremely possessive, extremely. So are Taurians. Parents of Taurians are extremely possessive, especially the mother. And again, I can get into these details later. You can send me your questions, put them in the comments section, or call me at 413-217-1825, and we can discuss it, or 212-286-8538. Okay. But the important thing is you have parents who, for their own reasons, and they're different sun signs, of course, often, or even if they're the same, but for their own reasons, they come in with their own warnings and their own advice and their own hopes and their own dreams for you. So it's important for Capricorns to reassess the value of masculinity, period, and then come to terms with it in the way that best suits you and your needs. Aquarius is another masculine sign, and it's an air sign. Capricorn is a feminine sign. However, it has to do with reassessing maleness and what it really is. Aquarius is a air sign. It is a masculine sign, and it is a sign in which the parents, at the time of conception of the Aquarian, parents weren't relating to each other at all. So the Aquarian comes in kind of with a real curiosity, like, what is relating anyway? What is intimacy really? What's it all about? And probably to some degree, not too much of an interest in it, because they're not that emotionally invested in it particularly. They've observed too much already about their own parents, and that can be exhausting for Aquarius. So oftentimes most of the Aquarians I have known, by the time they're 16 or 17, they're completely confused and they're not terribly invested in intimate relationships for sure. And they see the world as one big humanitarian experience rather than the interpersonal. And that's an important aspect of the Aquarian personality, is they'll be very happy to sit with you for hours and philosophize, but if you ask them to help you make dinner, they can't do that. Anyway, that's kind of funny, but it's also true. And this is why I enjoy astrology. I think it's hilarious. But anyway, it takes some time to finally bring in the intellectual aspect with the emotional, and then let's say the physical body or even the economic, because they're really happier with more of a humanitarian perspective. They're more at peace with that. They're kind of in their heads, and that's fine. They like that. Women too. And women are known, Aquarian women are known for going hot and cold, hot and cold. Really caring, really not. Very clear, not at all clear. Very decisive, no, not so decisive. So that's kind of the Aquarian. They're extremely driven. This has nothing to do with whether or not they can excel in whatever they choose to excel in at all. It's just their own independent process of, do I care or don't I really care? And that's kind of a very important theme for people who know Aquarians. And for the most part, they'll do almost anything they can for you if you're in need of anything. They'll most likely show up. They'll show up to help you move. They'll show up to help you find a place to live. They're humanitarians first. So anyone in relationship to them on a job or anywhere else needs to understand that. And that's one of the ways in which they are the most fulfilled and also the most beautiful people to know and to care about and to be cared for by them. Then you do have Pisces. Now, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and it's a feminine receptive sign. And it is also intuitive and very, very psychic. Pisces are always considered old souls, and they are. They've been through the karmic wheel, let's say, too many times to count. They come into the world in a grieving environment, generally by the time they're by the time they're 2 years old. From the time of conception to they're 2, usually somebody in the family has died, so there's been a lot of grieving in the family they're born into. So they have that immediate kind of sensory understanding of death, of coming and of going. And this is a part of their duality which remains with them on an intuitive level throughout their lives. They have a very keen sense of that level of fluidity. Oh, I'm here. It's great. I finally arrived. Wait, who died? What happened? Because the grieving environment is so profound in their upbringing in the beginning. Later on, they start to figure out and put words into this, and like everybody else, you try to figure out what's important to you or not. Pisces can have serious boundary issues. So in defense of those boundary issues, they may seem overly controlling or like they're so compromised they can easily become addicted. They are one of the sun signs who are prone to addictions. And then as they become more and more conscious and less long-suffering, they become less vulnerable. And then they start to figure out how to have the kind of life that they really do want for themselves. And that's a real moment for Pisces. And that can happen at any time too. Pisces can happen when they're 13, can happen when they're 20, 25, 45, even 60. None of us stop growing. None of us stop figuring things out. And that's another aspect of astrology that I love because it gives you access and it gives you permission to doing that because there's constant transits in a natal horoscope. So we're actually constantly in a process of change and transformation. So it's important to have an understanding of this, I believe, in the most positive ways possible. So if I meet somebody and they tell me that they are a Gemini, I'll be okay. That's cool. And somebody else will go, oh, Gemini, I can't stand Geminis. I don't see it that way at all. But I just thought I'd share that because it's part of the sort of the pop culture aspect of being reactionary. And it's funny, people come from their own experiences and they have a lot of different experiences with one another. But it makes me laugh. It just makes me laugh. Let's see, what else can I tell you today? I think that humor is very important to focus on whenever you're able and with whomever you're able. Let's see, I also wanted to add something. Somebody asked me something about YouTubers. Who do I watch? I think I mentioned it in the last episode. And then it occurred to me today to tell you who I don't watch, because it was a solar eclipse in Virgo after all, which means we're all supposed to be quite critical right now, critical thinkers. That's what solar eclipse in Virgo would do. One of the manifestations of that for many of us is cleaning out our closets, throwing away clutter, packing things up, re-identifying things, putting things into it like an archival list so we have easier access to things in a couple of months. The impact of this desire to clean, this need to sort through, this painstaking way to look very, very critically at what you need and what you no longer do need is going to be happening for the next 6 months. And I think that that's a very helpful thing, but I also think it explains that we're all kind of coming out of the COVID experience. Well, those of us who are not still grieving over somebody who died in it, since it's gotten no coverage, as if it never happened. But anyway, we'll move on from that. Meanwhile, you want to clean up your closets, you want to throw things out. You may have had to move without having wanted to move, so it's a very big deal. And also, you want to clear your mind. You have to clear your mind. One of the things that's been important is letting go. Letting go. Putting closure on things, completing things. No longer needing to obsess over things, and just releasing that kind of tension. And let it go. Let it go. And somebody had said to me, what kind of shows do I watch on YouTube? I watch certain astrologers that I enjoy, but I do not watch astrologers who have an advertisement on YouTube with a big smile in their face. I will not watch them. Anyone who could advertise with a huge smile in their face in these times, there's nothing in the world that I could possibly learn from them. Another one that I don't watch, having watched one or two, is ones who repeat and repeat and repeat the same thing over and over again. What they're looking for is that listener to tune in and then be able to hear what they may have said 20 minutes ago when that listener was not on it. It's all a form of employment for them, and that's why the repetition. I don't like it. It's boring. I don't want to hear the same thing over and over and again, so I don't do that. And I hope they make plenty of money doing whatever they're doing. Great. But I don't watch it. Another kind of astrologer is one who explains and explains and explains the same thing. Like a person walked over to the corner, then they made a left, then they made a right, and maybe you like the left, and maybe you don't like it, but maybe you don't. So maybe they're doing that because they want a cup of tea, or else they're going to go to get a cup of coffee, or maybe they just came out of a grocery store. Like, I don't care about the history of the metaphor. I don't care. So for me, I don't. If there's too much repetition, I don't listen to them. And I prefer people who are obviously very brilliant, know what they're talking about, but also have a sense of humor in it. Because all of us are frustrated. All of us are, if we're not angry about one thing, we are angry about another. All of us are having to try to figure out how to get through the particular cycles that we are in right now. And so I do like it when an astrologer will be honest and say, you know what, we think we know what we're talking about. In a way, we don't know. We don't know. I love that. Because you know who knows? You know. You know what's going on. You know what you're creating. You know what if you need to go to a march or not. You are the one who knows if you're really a writer or are you not really a writer. You know. It's not up to any astrology to tell you who you are. You know who you are. So just bring yourself to the table. Just bring your life forward if that's what you choose to do. And then keep welcoming humanity into your life in the way that makes the most sense for you. And clear the landscape for yourself so that if you have things that are enormously painful and that you feel are blocking you or making you stuck, rummage through those particular things, think them over, get the help you're needing, or figure out your way to release what is no longer serving you and humanity, not one at the exclusion of the other. At least not on my show. Because the essence of transformation is to figure out, how do I serve myself while I'm serving humanity? Okay, I thought I was doing that already. Maybe you are. But if you're not, this program certainly encourages you to do that. So learn how to speak of your own dreams, even in the midst of tragedy. Sort through the identity issues that matter most to you, that have the most to do with your mental health, your emotional well-being, your physical health, and even your fiscal health. Pay attention, as you're doing anyway, to the tragedies that surround you. Get support through conversation for whatever issues are really seeming to be too difficult for you to suppress. Try not to remain in isolation. Try not to insulate yourself if you can help it. One person wrote me and said, "Am I a soldier or a spiritual warrior?" I think you're both. I think we're both. So, in the next show, I plan to discuss the twin flame dilemmas. It's when you appear to be, or you are, part soulmate to somebody. It is so popular now, the last 4 years. It's been just amazing. So I am going to start to really discuss that. I think it will be a lot of fun. And if you need to call for any reason regarding this work, my number is 413-282-8538, 413-282-8538. I do have an assistant, and so she definitely goes through the work, through the messages, to be sure that the message is actually about the work. My work is work as a medium, a speaker, a photographer, and I have prints, etc. for sale as well, as I've mentioned before. And you can go to www.spiritually-speaking.org to see more prints. And you can go back to the Essence of Transformation, episode 1, because many of them are in that episode with more and more explanations about me and the work that I've done and what I am doing. So I hope that takes care of this particular episode in a way that, at least to some extent, may have made you laugh. I hope you do relate to the sun signs in the ways in which I've suggested you might. I think that they are a lot of fun. I think instead of being overly critical of one another's sun sign, we should simply just dig it. Just, oh, it's a Scorpio. Oh, Gemini. Gee, okay, cool. Oh, what about that Virgo? Very tidy. Okay. What about that Sagittarius? Oh, she's over there dreaming. She's dreaming and dreaming. What about that Libra? Oops, she's taking care of another war. What a diplomat. Okay, you get my point. Have a wonderful, wonderful couple of weeks till I see you again. Bye-bye.